So this afternoon, as part of day 6 on our Time to Grow programme currently, we're going to be getting back into business planning. On yesterday's session, we started looking at the 2-sentence business plan, which we're going to recap and relook at. And if people want to just pick back up with that and use that, they can. But there's going to be some other tools and other things that we're talking about around business planning. And we might hear from a couple of people in the group here who might be, experienced at doing some of this stuff. We'll see where we get to. But before I start looking at sharing some of those tools and getting into different methods, I just wanted to pick us back up last time. For anybody that didn't make last time's session, we ran a session that part of it looked at customers, beneficiaries and stakeholders and trying to describe the difference. This came up yesterday, so I felt the need to flag this back up. So what we often talk about in the social enterprise world is that your customers are not always the people who come to your service. Often you're trying to give services to people free at the point of access, or they're coming to benefit from something and somebody else is paying for it. You might be working with young people, in which case somebody else might be paying for it, or you might be working with people who haven't got the financial means to pay for it and somebody else has got to pay for it. And that's often what one of the blockers is in helping people when they're starting a social venture think about where's the income coming from. And we walked through income generation yesterday and we were talking about different, who's the customer. And I'm just throwing this slide back up. It's one that I share with people quite a lot that both helps them differentiate who these people are and it links back to the persona exercise that we've done with Shelley this morning. So you might have focused your persona on, that disadvantaged woman or that student of a particular college or whoever your immediate beneficiary is, but there are other personas that you might need to do in order to get the full picture of who you're trying to communicate with. So that's why I flashed this up. Go and recap that session. If I'm not going to go into huge detail about, all of this, but when we spoke about it last time, we were trying to map different customers, beneficiaries and stakeholders and think about, think about who's got the need, who's got power and influence and who's got money, because often then they don't all have the same. And as you'll see, they've been mapped out in different ways here. Now, we've got them here fleshed up, not only to kind of create a nice link on from Shelley's persona session to get you thinking about other personas in your sort of stakeholder mix that you might want to think about, but these characters and this language comes up in business planning and in the business model canvas we're going to look at shortly. So it's another reason why we've flagged these people up. The social value proposition or your products and services are aimed at these people, and that's it's just wanted to recap that. So yesterday we looked at this 2-sentence business plan. What I find is the business model canvas or the social business canvas that we use, it can look a bit overwhelming at first, or it's like, oh, where do I start with this? Whereas this tool is a little bit more simplistic. And in the worksheet pack that everybody's got who's on the Time to Grow course, this is one of those sheets where if you can work through this, as lots of people who came yesterday did or started to, it gives you some of the key critical elements of what you would then expand on in a wider or longer business plan, should you choose or need to put one together. So again, we're following on from what we did yesterday. So just recap that for anyone who missed it, or for you to dig out your notes that you made yesterday, because you might find them helpful this afternoon. So before we get into it all, I've got this sort of business plan slide, because I'm not a big advocate for writing business plans. I think they take an awful lot of time. There can be an awful lot of waffle that most people read and think's a load of crap anyway. Don't excuse my French, but I've read endless business plans and they're so poorly put together, they weren't worth bothering with. They're a tool for you and they have to be a workable tool for you. And if a full-on business plan is going to be a workable tool for you, or there's a genuine need for putting one together, go for it. But as I say, it can be overwhelming and, you can get lost in translation with what's in there. people can get very bogged down in writing the waffle and not get to the really important bit, which is the money, which is what we covered yesterday. If you're going to start anywhere with a business plan, please start with the finances and the budget and check that it all financially stacks up. Was my top tip with business planning. I know we're walking you through a lot of communication stuff and how to narrow down and be clear about your vision and your goal and your mission and what your products and services might be and how you might describe those to people. But being able to articulate those verbally, get them out there into your market in ways that they're going to want to understand and that they are going to access is key. And the rest comes in its own good time. And what I often recommend is, rather than write a full-on business plan that can take a long time, costs money to do well, then sectioning it up into chunks or strategy documents or specific reports is a much better way of going about it, in my view, than trying to write this 25 to 100 page document that, you know, who's going to read it and will you read it? That said, there is a time and a place for these things, you know. So if you are seeking investment, you know, of 20 to 50 or 100k plus, you're going to need a thorough business plan. Some banks want you to have a business plan of sorts to open a business bank account. Thankfully, NatWest don't, so we've gone with NatWest. Yeah, certain funders might want to see a business plan. More often than not, they don't. You'll have a series of documents. You might have a business plan, or you might have a series of reports or strategic documents where you cut and paste information from. So this content is important to pull together, but you don't necessarily have to pull it all together at once. And certainly there are times and places where more thorough financial plans are required, as we discussed yesterday. So, you know, I'm not saying don't write a business plan. You know, if you have a team that you need to share information with, if you really want to get all this out of your head so you're clear about what you're doing, or there's an audience that needs to read it, you know, put it together or start to put it together, but don't feel like you have to. There's project plans, there's budgets. Certainly if you're piloting something, don't get lost in writing a business plan, get piloting and learn what it is you're doing. And then the business plan will you know, sort itself out. And what I'm saying is that by using tools like the 2-sentence business plan, the business model canvas we're going to look at in a minute, and various strategy documents got down the bottom, a social value report, a marketing strategy, an income generation strategy, competitor analysis, financial projections, these elements that are a little bit more manageable as a standalone piece of work, then structure themselves nicely as a business plan over time. And the documents that you're more likely to use, and if they're in chunks, you can review that chunk and you can update that chunk rather than feel like you've got to update the whole thing. So just on that point, I know I put this slide in here only because that graphic's a little bit small to read. If there are those of you listening to this who, you know, want an example of what's in a business plan, and others of you here might have other tips, so I'll come to you in a second on this topic. But this is a contents page for a business plan that I wrote for the Old Abbey Tap House the other year. You know, it took about, it can take a good 7 to 10 days to put together, and then some, depending on who it's for, what it is, what information you've already got to hand. And thankfully it secured them, you know, £50,000, you know, to develop what they were doing. But you know, they're a faff. And for those of you that are busy just trying to start and run what you're doing, this is really overwhelming. And I would say, wherever possible, buy in people who can do this well and can do it quickly and get results from them, if that makes sense. So I put that out there as some elements. I do have other tools if somebody's wanting to really get into writing a full-on business plan. But more often than not, we find the social entrepreneurs that are running the show haven't got the time to write this stuff down. And that's why they bring in people like me and lots of other good social business consultants that we know who do this stuff really well and take the pain out of it for you. We were talking about pain points earlier. So it's just a tip there. Before I get into some other bits, anybody here already written some form of business plan?
Nicola, I've got a quick question, please.
Yeah, fire away.
And it's very practical. What sort of price is it to get somebody in to help you with that sort of thing? I mean, hourly or a job lot? What sort of cost is it?
Most of them tend to work on a day rate. So it varies. You know, people on a day rate might be working on anything from, I wouldn't want to sell myself down. I couldn't afford to work for £150 a day, but some people do. But anything from £150 to £350 a day and upwards is what people would be charging to come and do some of this stuff, or to sift through what you've got. One of the things that consultants like me would do was work with somebody through an Awards for All grant. Awards for All grants are one of the few, well, not few, but they're one of the grants out there where pulling together strategy documents and key intelligence and putting together, you know, building the core capacity of your organisation is something that that fund can do. So it's not unusual that grants like that and others, this social enterprise support fund that's back out, highly competitive, a lot of work to go for that. But some grants like that, you can, you know, put in these sorts of costs to have somebody come in and help you. And you know, I've seen people pull business plans together for people for, you know, £750 to £1,500 at the lower end. But if you've nothing started and there's quite a lot to do, there's a lot more involved in that. And I would be looking more like 2 to 7.5K over a period of time to do stuff well. You don't have to do it all at once necessarily. But anyway, it varies. And certainly for most people on our Time to Grow programme right now who was just starting out, you don't have to worry about any of that. You just need to get your ideas down first and get things trialed and get things started. I just wondered, has anybody gone to the lengths of putting a business plan together? I wasn't sure if Sissy, you might have done this sort of thing yet, or anybody else on the call.
I done it a long time ago in a small version.
Yeah.
But I set my business up from the back of an envelope.
Yeah, I think lots, and it, well, that's
an A3, A4 envelope, just wrote my ideas down and then started to make the contacts.
Yeah, and you know, some people are surprised to hear that kind of thing. It's really not unusual. Most business owners on the high street, if you know, don't spend years of their life writing business plans, but they have key documents and reports and processes in place to check and review. And you know, certainly in social enterprises, because a lot of them are going for funding, some of them might go for investment. You grow quite quickly potentially as a social enterprise because you're not a one-man band per se. You're trying to create social change. So you have to bring people on board. You have to be able to communicate what you're doing to others. So that you would get into business planning potentially more quickly than others, but there's no harm in using simple tools and having those simple tools work well for you rather than get overwhelmed by something like this. So it's horses for courses approach is always my sort of route on this, and that's why we're going to look at some simple stuff initially and then we'll get into a couple of other bits. So you'll all remember, for those of you that came last time, we looked at the SWOT analysis. We looked at it for something slightly differently. We were looking at SWOT analysis on our ideas, but you can use so in refining your ideas and working out which one's the best one to start with, or shall I go for this, or shall we do that, or should we start this new service? A SWOT analysis can be really good for that. But actually, if you sat back and thought about what it is you're trying to do overall, and as an organisation or as a business or wherever you know, as a project or program, running through a SWOT analysis and thinking, you know, just being able to lay out what are your strengths, what are your strengths as a business and organisation, where are your strengths, you know, where do you know some of your weaknesses or areas for development are, you know, what are some of the opportunities that are around at the moment that make your business doable, viable and ready to go, and perhaps what some of the threats or challenges around what you're doing. This, you know, a SWOT analysis is often included within a business plan. You know, it's not unusual that business plans will have this. So using this as a starting point isn't a waste of time because it forms a section within a bigger business plan, and it gives that reader an at a glance look, you know, what the key strengths of what you're doing are, where you know you've got room for improvement, or that's why you're asking for this money, because you've got areas to strengthen. You can tell them what the wider opportunities are. I'm going to show you a tool in a minute. The PESTLE tool is another sort of a way to look at opportunities, sort of very sort of strategic and wide, what the bigger picture says about why there's a need for what you're doing, and threats, wider competition, and again, the PESTLE report would tell you about threats in much more detail. So the SWOT analysis we've looked at before. If today you'd rather just look at and use a SWOT analysis, and we've got 5 or 10 minutes in a minute to make a start on some of this, that's absolutely fine if that's your best starting point. The PESTLE, which I just talked about a moment ago, so this is another report really, but it's can form a section within your business plan, or it works really well as a standalone activity. So it helps you understand the wider risks and opportunities. So that opportunities and threats part of the SWOT analysis can be really improved and really strengthened by doing a PESTLE analysis or PESTLE report. It helps you consider risk. It helps you evidence what's going on. It helps start to talk about what you're doing in language that's beyond your own. So the PESTLE, as it says, various political is trying to put a lens on your organisation and think about what's the wider context saying about the need for your project, business, activity, services. What does the political will, the political landscape, what does national policy and strategy say about the need for what you're doing? So what's the Department of Health saying around what you're doing? What's the criminal justice system saying about what you're doing? What's environmental strategies saying about what you're doing? And the only way you would know that is if you get Googling and reading some strategy documents. Now that might sound really boring, but that's the quickest and easiest way to present a case for the demand. If you've not had your focus groups yet, and if you've not looked fully into the wider evidence base for what you're doing, you can bet your bottom dollar there's 30 to 50 organisations that already have, so why not use what's already publicly available? And it will give you all sorts of detail, particularly on the political, potentially economic, certainly on the local perspective of what you're doing. And so Greater Manchester Combined Authority produce all sorts of strategy documents on anything and everything, and they'll all be sitting on their website. Your local CVS would possibly have written a bunch of policy documents on a range of things, from health and well-being to low carbon economies to
CVS, Nicola.
Council for Voluntary Services. So Sector 3 in your case will be starting to churn these out, and MAC and Salford CVS and Action Together. We've mentioned some of these organisations before. In Wigan, it's just changed, but it's still Tracy Wormold within the council looking after the CVS stuff, or Dave at Abram Ward Cooperative. So in terms of understanding this stuff, getting your head around, the Arts Council will have created a whole heap of stuff, the Department of Education and local education authorities. It's just, we can talk about this with people on an individual case-by-case basis, but the world of research and policy documents is endless, and you can get lost out there. But if you can just get your hands on 3 or 4 good ones that are current, and all you've got to do is, policy, you can just Google away and it'll all come up. So, for example, a lot of you are working around health and well-being or mental health. And there was, has anybody heard of the 5-year forward review? So 5 years, there you go. Woo! Whatever you make of it's another thing, but that's a strategic policy document all about mental health. And then there's there are all sorts of for everything you're doing, there's policy documents coming out your ears, and it will just save you so much time. It'll give you the killer stats that you couldn't get your hands on even if you tried right now. And it's a nice national and strategic landscape of what's going on to mirror up with the data or research or surveys or focus group information you can get from your own direct beneficiaries, consumers and others, and between research that's local and national with your immediate research with your direct customers or service users or beneficiaries, you've then got a much more powerful case for explaining why there's a need for what you're doing. Economic is talking about, you know, what's the economic world is what you're doing. Does it sit within the local economic strategy? Have you ever, are you aware there's a local economic strategy? Go and see what it says in your borough, if that's relevant, or in other places. You know, what's the social interest and the social sort of appetite for what you're doing? What's the technological will and interest and appetite for what you're doing? You know, are you going against the grain? Are you in a good place in terms of technological will for what you're doing? Locally, that there'll be all sorts that you'll need to work out, and that's already available in terms of what's the local demand, local will, the local need, you know, for what's happening, and you know, and what's the environmental sort of perspective on what you're doing. You know, have you thought about that? Is what you're doing linked to the environment in any way? And even if you don't feel like it is, actually, you know, we're all in Greater Manchester. I was only made aware more recently, Greater Manchester is meant to be zero carbon, so carbon neutral by 2038. So we've all got an environmental angle on what we're doing, whether we think we do or not. And the more you can be aware of that, align what you're doing with that, and show that you've considered that, it might just tick somebody's box in terms of backing what you're doing, or realizing that, you know, you're the kind of organizational venture they want to support because you've thought about that consideration. So hopefully, has anybody got any questions on this? It's something that's, you know, if you haven't done it, you know, it's and even if it's a bit like, oh, I'm not sure about this, if you can just sit and think, put a bit of a lens on, you know, even if you don't know, what might you need to find out, or where might you need to look to help, just think, you know, what do the different political parties say about health and well-being, education, violence against women and girls, creative and cultural industries, you know, and, you know, what's the political will for backing certain things? You know, what's our sort of local economic development departments prioritising? You know, and what's, you know, how do you align what you're doing with wider environmental strategies? We'll give you a starter for 10 on some of this stuff. Melanie, you've got your hands up. Can I answer a question at all?
Yeah, thanks. It's just this is really interesting, because I find myself reading policy documents, I have in the past sort of year, and I thought, what am I doing this for? You know, I've looked at things like, you know, economic regeneration visions for this where I live and stuff like that, and social housing visions and what have you. But what you're saying is to actually put that research to work,
yes,
by literally quoting them back to themselves.
Totally.
And going, I know that you want to do this, and we think we can help you here.
Exactly.
Simple as that. And to have the guts and the courage to go, well, we think we can meet your need.
Totally.
And it's also, I think, because Amy and myself, you know, we come from an art background, so inside institutions, the art department are usually a bit like, oh, they're the weirdos over there. So I think for me, some of these barriers are about like
perceptions and
but also
overcoming,
aligning myself to things that are sort of seen as being institutional. You know, if you're a social enterprise or you're a community, you know, you feel a bit fringy and a bit like, I'm frightened of also having like that sellout kind of thing and go, oh, now I'm they're the organ grinder and I'm the monkey. But I can see that you're sort of saying, use them to help me, to help the people that
play them at their own game and shame them into doing what they said they would do in the first place. You know, that's what we normally do. or we try, you know, not quite as blunt as that, but we're not shaming them, although we sometimes might. It's helping them get there quicker because you've looked at what they said they were going to do, and rather than wait, so long as it's costed and you're not doing all this on your own time and you're not feeling like the monkey in the organ grinder, so long as you're setting out your store to say, we deliver these brilliant services and we can, you know, meet these, you know, strategic goals that whoever it is that are, you know, local school, local health authorities, local wherever, or nationally, depending on where you're working, we can address these by blah, blah, blah. And it's just a case of piecing it together. And it's not always obvious at first, and particularly when you're at the early stages of developing an idea, this can seem a stage apart. But if you've been running a year or two, this should be something that you can pick up and start to push and use well. And you'll find when you start reading, and in the session that we do next time around impact measurement, I'll start to show you how some of the stats and data makes a real difference when you use them well in funding bids, tenders and everything else. But as a starting point, even if you just put a lens on your idea or on your business and just think in these terms, what, you know, what's the wider world saying about this? What are there opportunities and threats? Are there any risks attached to what I'm doing because of the way the landscape looks right now in these areas? You know, if you're trying to do something, when we're trying to be carbon neutral, and everybody suddenly realizes we can't start doing X, Y, and Z anymore. You know, technology can change things very quickly overnight for certain things, as we've all seen through the pandemic. And it's giving yourself that horizon gazing opportunity to think, whilst I might think I want to run it like this, or I'm doing this, or I'm solving a need this way, and this way might work for now, what risks and what wider evidence is there out there that tells me that I'm, you know, I might need to shift what I'm doing, or that I'm in the right place with what I'm doing. So hopefully that's helpful. I don't know if anybody's got any other questions on that. It's just, but it's something that you, if you want to be bullet pointing down or thinking about this, hopefully you've been doing it as I'm speaking, or you can take a bit of time afterwards to have a look at that. So we're then going to get into, I'm just checking I've not missed something there, because I know what I'm like. Yeah, so we're going to start looking at the business model canvas. How am I for time, Shelley?
Sorry, Nicola, will you send that out, because I couldn't see that document in the.
So Shelley sent a work pack out, and the slides will come out after today, I think.
Brilliant, thank you.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's right. It's in the work pack, and yeah, it'll be on the slides as well. So it's 1:05, so you're bang on time.
Oh, phew. So so business model canvas. This really is just, you know, gets bandied about a lot this term, but it's the beauty of it is it simplifies things again. So rather than having to write 25 pages, you've got one page and a lot of very tiny writing. It depends on, you know, what you want to put in it, but it builds on this 2-sentence business plan that we did yesterday. It's relatively easy to understand. It just takes things along a bit. It gives you that one-page overview that just really puts things together. And like we've been doing all day with the personas and other things we've been talking about, it's customer focused. It really makes you think about what value you're going to bring to your customers and beneficiaries, as well as chunks out the different elements of what you're doing and shows how they all sort of interplay with one another, as I'll show you in a minute. And it should be, you know, describing a whole bunch of things. You know, it might describe how you create, deliver and capture value. It might describe, you know, what resources you need and what your sort of overall business model is going to look like. And really, you know, the business model is a way in which a company is going to generate surpluses or profits. It's going to clean its own face and hopefully more beyond in order to generate surpluses to reinvest back into the community or back into wider ventures. We've already said, you know, people can get into waffling away, you know, without really thinking about the operational way that they're going to make this business work and how the different parts of it are going to function. And hopefully, if we walk through this business model canvas, it will show you a way of helping with some of this. So we've set it out. There are 2 or 3 different kinds of business model canvas. we tend to use this one. I will share a link with you in the chat in a bit. A colleague of mine who I'm doing some work with on another programme, Naomi Timperley. I don't know if anyone's heard of Naomi, but she runs all sorts of programmes, works a bit more in the tech world, and she ran a really good session recently as part of this programme on this. So in addition to listening to me ramble on about this, I thought if I also share Naomi's workshop with you that walks through some examples of this as well, in a different way, it might just, sometimes you need to hear it a second time or from a different perspective to get it to knit together. So I will share that with you shortly, but let's walk through this from the way I would look at this. And then what I'm going to do is probably pick on a couple of people that we were talking to this morning, to think about how we might work through this as an example, and walk through somebody's business as a way of sort of describing these different elements. So you can start in various points on here, that's why it can get a bit overwhelming, because you just look at it and think, oh God, where do I start? And I would start with what you know. Start with where you are and what you know now, and bullet pointing down what you know. So in the emails that Shelley sent you in the work pack, there is this that you could use, print out, or you could just draw this out in your notepad wherever you are, whatever's been most useful. So if we started from where we've been thinking already on the programme, we know that who our beneficiaries are, because we were describing them this morning, and our customers. So, if you were to start in the segments box for the people that you're trying to benefit, these are people or organisations who will pay to address, the social issues that we did our show and tell this morning, and people talked about, what's the social issue that they're trying to address. And we're going to come back to sort of mission statements and so forth just before the end of the session today. But in this segment about segments, these are who might pay to address this issue, and they could be, you can put both, and the good thing about the social business model canvas is it does recognise the difference between beneficiaries who may or may not be directly paying for something and the customer who's paying for it. So I would be doodling down in that segments box, who are your beneficiaries? We heard from people this morning, it might be people linked to faith groups. It might be homeless people, it might be disadvantaged women, it might be, young people, it might be people who've realised, they want to get outdoors more. But who are these people? And if you can name them, or if you can think about what, where they are, all the better, and who's paying for it. And it might be them, it might be the general public, it might be in the future a commissioner of services, it might be I'm trying to think, a whole range of, even funders to a point. Maybe, if it's that, I wouldn't say that a grant funder, like a traditional local or pilot project grant funder, but lots of local authorities provide different kinds of grant agreements, that are, if it's potentially on a repetitive basis, certain types of, commissioners of grant agreements to do certain activities might well sit in that box. So local authorities, it might be some sort of clinical commissioning group that you might want to approach, or social prescribers people talked about yesterday, who might be the beneficiaries and the customers of who's buying, and we can talk around that, and we can help people one-to-one work that out. But if you can bullet point who you think they are that you can see right now, or that you envisage in future, that's a place to start. The next, we also talked this morning with Shelley, on the personas, that channels bit. How are you reaching your beneficiaries and customers? So in that little box, in that segment, we can then start to expand exactly what you thought earlier today. Is it by word of mouth? Is it, and are you having to create some sort of events or outreach activities to stimulate that word of mouth? Is it through events and other things? Is it through social media? Is it through the press? Is it through trade publications? Yeah. How are you reaching these people? How are you getting hold of them? You know, are you having, you know, do you sit on some sort of local community board or strategic forum, or, you know, patient liaison group to reach people? What are your channels and your methods of reaching your customers, to tell them about what you're doing, to engage them in what you're doing, and to convince them to access what you have to offer? The key activities is all about what you're doing. So you've started to think over recent weeks, if not for the last however long, you know, what are you running? So we heard from people this morning that they're perhaps running drop-ins, or they're running events, or they're offering programs or courses or retreats. You know, these are the key things that you're going to be doing. Well, sorry, there's an overlap, isn't there, between the key activities and the type of intervention. Sorry, so the type of intervention might be a workshop or an event, or what we were just saying, you know, retreats, drop-ins. The key activities are, you know, what you're going to be doing day to day. You know, whether it's, you know, programs and those sorts of things. What's your organisation going to be carrying out day to day? It might be. So, for example, in order to deliver that workshop, or that retreat, or that drop-in, you know, you've got to do, you know, planning and development of, you know, sessions and activities. You might have to, you know, maintain, you know, contacts databases in order to, you know, carry out promotion activities. You might have to store equipment, or, you know, organise transport, or all manner of things. Go on, Melanie, fire away. Ooh. Sorry, you got a question?
Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah.
I'm not quite following this box. I'm kind of there.
Which box?
So the key activities box.
Yeah.
So
the key activities.
You talked about there being two different types of key activity.
Yeah, type of intervention. So when you think of your key activities, initially you're probably thinking about your intervention. So you're thinking, you know, we're running a festival, or we're running art classes, or we're running a window campaign in a high street. That's your intervention. That's how, you know, how your intervention is how you would describe what you're doing to the outside world. And your key activities is the kind of operational logistics and what you have to plan and do and organise behind the scenes.
Right, I totally understand that in theory.
Yeah.
I couldn't apply it to the language in this structure.
Yeah.
So key activities is what I need to do.
The organisational activities.
To get to the type of intervention that I'm having.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, right, so the intervention is the overarching thing, and the activities are how do I get there?
Yes, I'd say.
Yeah.
Does that make sense for people, hopefully? And as I say, you'll fill in the boxes based on what you know, but sometimes it's the language and the way these things are being put together. And the original business model canvas, you know, was done on sort of corporate speak, and, you know, this has actually been changed from the original business model canvas to include things like your social value proposition and, you know, wider and beneficiaries and some of the language that we have in our own sort of world. But yeah, in this, the type of intervention is how you would describe what you're doing to the outside world. What do you have on offer? And the key activities are your key organisational activities in how you are able to, you know, put those interventions into place, or those services, or whatever you're running. That then allows you to take another bit of a step back, and you might, you know, you can jump around this, you know, and fill in the bits that make best sense to you. But once you've done your key activities, that can then potentially help you with your, well, what resources do we need in order to deliver these, you know, in order, you know, to make the key activities and interventions happen. So, and you know, to reach those channels of communication and marketing. So key resources might look like key staff, volunteers in some cases. It might look like types of finance. You know, there might be some capital outlay or some startup or ongoing finance that you'll need. There might be premises, there might be all sorts. So resources is both sort of financial and non-financial resources. Access to space, access to the outdoors, good weather, who knows, in Imelda's case. Just thinking about, Tikala was talking about working with disadvantaged women and building their sort of economic empowerment here in the UK and overseas. And so, that has other implications in terms of, is it just Zoom and technology resources, or are there other resources you might need in order to work more directly with people overseas? I don't know, but thinking about what resources you would need, and you can always categorize this, can't you? What you might need in the short term, what you might need in the longer term. We've talked a bit about this in the last few sessions about, who are your partners? So as much as you could think about what it is you're delivering, what you're doing behind the scenes to get there, and the resources that you either have in place or need to put in place. A big part of that is, wider partners and stakeholders, and your partners and stakeholders sort of linked to resources, and might be helping you deliver these activities and interventions, or there might be marketing partners. So there might be partners and stakeholders that link more to your channels, if you will, and link more to how you're going to reach people. So who are the essential people that you need around you to deliver what you're doing? And, it says here, do you need special access or permission? Who knows, you might, depends what you're doing. But, depending on the partners that you're working with, I suppose I'm trying to think where that would come into play. But, when you're working with partners, you have to be very careful. And sometimes you need partner agreements or service level agreements, or you might have to brand things up in a certain way, working with certain partners. It depends, doesn't it? If it's a fund partner, a corporate partner, or whoever else. So it's, that's detail to come later, but I would say mapping out, who are your key partners and who do they need to be. So for Flourish, some of our key partners are, our funders are key partners, and they're often wanting to be either recognised, mentioned, and they're a key part of enabling and making things happen. So the likes of Manchester City Council, NatWest, the WEA, so there's those sorts of partners. Other partners are coaches, that you've got. They're people that we're bringing on board in order to make sure that we can support everybody in the right way, bring diverse perspectives into. They're our partners. And we have other associates and people that are delivering those different bolt-on courses that some of you have been going to. So again, they're our partners. And then we have other partners who might promote and support what we do. So the CVSs and GMCVO and different strategic groups might also be partners. Can I answer a question for you, Mel?
Sorry.
Very helpful to have these questions. It prompts things that others might be thinking.
Cool. What's the difference between key resources and partners and stakeholders? So as you're saying this, I'm trying this out on an idea that we've got for the future.
Yeah.
So I've got the same group of people in key resources and partners and stakeholders. Is there any way that you would tease out the differentiation between how you'd identify whether they're, so this group of people, they're a resource because I want to use their land, but do they then become a partner and stakeholder because
there's potentially overlap there? I would say you can categorize them however you like, really, but key resources are things where they are, I would say it's more in the business and critical, to the delivery of the business objectives. Partners might come and go based project to project, or so in key resources, I wouldn't put our coaches in there per se. I could do if that's all we did, but we bring coaches in for certain bits of our business. And it's like our associates, again, they'd be partners, not key resources, because they're not in the business, if that makes sense.
Right, so you're talking about partners and stakeholders are more temporary and they come and go with projects.
I would say.
And key resources are things that you need integral to your organisation to keep you ticking over.
Yes, That's the way. I don't know whether Shelley's got any further comment on that, but that's how I'd section it out. I think, yeah, key resources for me are mainly, people are just one part of that, and the people is your human resources. If you think of it, sort of your staffing structure resource in key resources, then anybody who's broader that might be temporary, as you say, or contracted in, subcontracted, they'd be a partner or a wider stakeholder.
Yeah, I think I'd say the same. Definitely you'd include your staff in your key resources. I think for me, partners and key stakeholders might be more external to the organisation.
Exactly.
The people that you link up with, rather than, staff would fall under key resources very much for me.
So we could go one of two ways here with this, depending on what your preference is. Those of you who don't want to think about money just yet could jump straight to the value proposition. Those of you that want to get stuck into how does it all stack up, can look at the bottom. So you've got flexibility to move around, but I will perhaps go with value proposition. So this value proposition is, what's the value that you're bringing to your key customers and beneficiaries ultimately, and when you think about, when this is being put together in the corporate world, this is just the value proposition is very much more sort of financial. In the social business canvas, we're really thinking about the wider impact and the social value that you're bringing to people. So how are you going to show that you're creating impact is the question that will prompt you, and that will look different for everybody. So it may be that you're looking to improve people's well-being. It may be that you're going to be reducing their isolation. It may be that you're going to get more people outdoors to improve their health and well-being. It may be that you're going to be supporting people's economic independence. These were some of the examples we've given this morning. It might be that you're going to help people, build relationships, nurture communities. You'll have your own language starting to form, if not formed, to describe, what's the social value that you're bringing to people. And we've got a session the next session at the end of the month is looking at this specifically. So even if you're not quite sure yet what that should look like or what that is, it's the benefit. What's the benefit that people are going to get from being involved with you, and how are you going to ensure that you're achieving that? And the only way you're going to know that you're achieving that is if there's some way of benchmarking or measuring a level of impact. And so what might those impact measures be, and how are you going to go about measuring those? And we'll talk about that a lot more. There's something called key value indicators, which we can talk about another day, where eventually over time you might come up, once you've been running things over a series of waves or years, or however you're consistently running a similar service, you can speak to your target audience or your beneficiaries and ask them, what do they value about what you do? How are you making a difference to them personally, professionally, emotionally? What are they now doing differently as a result? And what will tell you what's happening for them, and you'll be able to draw a picture from what they tell you on where you're having the most impact, because there'll be these patterns emerge. You might be aware of them already, and they might be coming out to you, and they might be what you predicted or what you hoped and intended for in your social value proposition. But once you start asking people and you start listening to what they tell you verbally, in focus groups, on a survey, through little vox pops or whatever other way, you will then be able to create spot patterns in repeat ways in which you're making a difference with people, and you can then create ways to measure that impact, and have specific things that you track or specific things that you seek to notice, and you'll do that in a way that's best for your organization, what you can afford and what your beneficiaries are prepared to engage with. But once you do that, you can then clearly sort of outline the social value that you create. And so in the business plan, doing this in a thorough way, the social value report would outline your social value proposition. And there's different ways of communicating that, as we'll come on to next time. The step back from that, you know, there's another question to ask is, you know, what do your customers want to get out of this? So the two things kind of go hand in hand. There's what they want to get out of it, and you know, you can ask them that, or you might do some persona work like we did, and you can imagine, if you've not had a chance to directly ask them yet, what they want to get out of it, and then you go back later on and, you know, physically track that to show that you are having the intended impact, either that you intended, or to address these needs and to address what your customer wants to get from this. So hopefully that makes sense on that side of the scale. And as I say, we've got a whole day on that at the end of the month to help you think more clearly on that. But the language doesn't help, I appreciate, with some of this, but ultimately, you know, how we, you know, what do your customers want to get out of what you have to offer, and, you know, what are you going to ask them, and how are you going to show that you're creating this impact?
Nicola, what's a good way to measure that?
We'll find out next time. We've got a whole day on it next time. That there's various ways, and yeah, we've got a full day all about it on the 30th of March. So you'll get plenty of time to have a look at that. And yeah, it's slightly different for everybody, but there's some key principles, and certainly, yeah, asking people and creating the time. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money to do that, as you'll come to see. So, and doing it consistently is the key. And people often don't bother to do it until halfway through or at the end. By then, I wouldn't say it's too late, but it's never too early to start measuring your impact. So, last but not least, across the bottom there, we've got this sort of financial sort of strip. So thinking about these key activities, thinking about how you're going to try and market and reach people with what you're doing through these channels, thinking about these different resources and wider partners that you might have to have involved, paid for or not paid for, depending on what kind of partner they are. What are your biggest expenditure areas? You know, what costs the most? You know, is it staff? Is it room hire? Is it paying for a van? You know, is it having some premises? Is it who knows? You'll know within your own organisations and your own plans what's the biggest areas of expenditure, and that will come back to what we looked at with Gurge yesterday when you're starting to think about your budgets. You know, month on month, year on year, where's the key cost? What's the key financial burden for you? And as Gurge was starting to talk about yesterday, when you start to track this over time, and when you start to map not just a cash flow, but you're looking at your actuals in your own sort of bank statements and looking through your accounts year on year, what might need to change, you know, rather than wait to just for what your accounts might tell you, you need to project this stuff. So what might change as you scale up? You know, might staffing costs suddenly need to scale? Might your technology costs suddenly need to scale? You know, who knows? You know, you'll know in terms of your own plans. Kirsty, I think you've got a question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, something that I really struggle with is how to price services. Do you have any tips on, I mean, I did some research on what other people were charging doing similar kinds of things, but I always get in a tangle with it. So I just wondered if you got any advice.
Absolutely. I mean, we never run a session on this. Gurge has planned to, and we've not done it yet. So there will be a session, not in the Time to Grow programs, but anyway, for all to access, there will be a pricing workshop because it comes up a lot. Ultimately, there's 2 or 3 ways to think about pricing. You've got to price to create full cost recovery. So you have to think, you know, whatever it costs to create or deliver or do, that's, you know, what's the bare minimum, you know, in terms of, you know, your time, the materials, you know, any other, you know, cost of creating the sales, your other overheads. So there's the physical cost it create, you know, cost to create that unit or that thing or that offer for people. And then the flip side of that is whatever willing whatever people are willing to pay. So, you know, there's a tin of beans that sits in Aldi for, I don't know, 18, 20p. Same tin of beans might sit in Waitrose for 80p, you know, and so, and you know, everything in between. And so there's an exercise that you can go through thinking about, you know, how do you want to be perceived, and what's your perceived worth? And so I would suggest that it's your kind of full cost recovery plus perceived worth is the way to price things up. Yes, absolutely, look at your wider competitors, and that will help you think about where you want to sit in the landscape of what you have to offer. And often what people will do in the social economy is they might have a sliding scale. That's the other thing to add into your pricing, so that you might have price bands. So you know, for people who are currently unemployed, or if their company turnover or whatever they're doing is under a certain level, you might offer subsidies or free stuff or whatever it is. And then for people, other types of people or organizations, you know, it goes up dependent on certain criteria that you set out, and other companies work that way, and it's not unusual to do that.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so there's, you know, working out your biggest expenditure areas and how they might change as you grow. Surpluses, some people struggle to think, how on earth am I going to make money at this? And sometimes that's a mindset thing. Sometimes it's to do with who you're immediately working with right now. And it's a bit like Kirsty said before, oh, I've got these young people, they can't pay me, who can? So you need to think about who is going to pay, but then you also, you know, can think about diversifying what you're doing. So you might be working with a particular group. So I could be making this up, Mel, but I'm just thinking in your case. So let's say, for example, you were going to work with a high street to boost sales at Christmas and get people through the door. You know, and you know, you might have had a grant to do that in a particular area, and you know, all these fabulous windows are there. You took a load of photos, there's videos about it, all this stuff. You can measure the impact and say, you know, that Christmas there were 20% more people out in the village. Shops reported higher takings for that year or for that month or whatever it was. So there's ways of showing we did a good job. And then you think, well, this village can't afford to pay for us, or this town can't, so we need to find ways to subsidize that. But other areas might, or other shops or other things. So you can take that service that you've developed and work with it with a client group that can afford to pay for it. And so this is where, you know, surpluses can kick in. Surpluses, you can't get surpluses from grants. Grants don't create root for profit margin. Often contracts and tenders rarely create surpluses. And there's ways and means, you know, of jiggling around spend, underspend, and I won't call it, well, people call it creative accounting, but there's ways of creating small amounts of surplus on certain things. But in the main, depending on how you're reporting something back, there's not. It's only through, you know, broader thinking on what you're, you know, creating those opportunities where you can create margins where those surpluses arise. And so thinking about how you're going to invest that in the future, you know, it might be critical to what you're doing, or it might be somewhere down the line. But as a non-profit organisation, or as a KIC, or as even as an ethical business and a private business, you know, not some will want to demonstrate what they're doing with their surplus profits as part of their ethics and their ethos. So having a think about that. Initially, any surpluses are usually just there to kind of go back into developing the organisation and grow, but there may come a point where there are surpluses you can do stuff with. And is that initiating new ventures? Is it investing in other things? So at Flourish, for example, we create surplus time, money, and resources to invest in women. So even though we're not turning over mega bucks, and thankfully we don't have heaps of corporation tax to pay because we've not got huge profits, we maximize the profits we can invest in others through creating seed funding through the journey of the programs that we run, and through the way we choose to purchase. So there's other ways of creating surpluses or ways to invest in your community, even if you're not turning over huge profits. And then revenue, this box here is you know, looking at your revenue sources. Well, so it says there, revenue sources by percentage, if you so wish. I mean, it all flows into your finances really, but it's showing, you know, let's say often people are very interested to know how financially stable and sustainable social ventures are. So, you know, there are these golden rules of thumb that says a social enterprise should be, you know, 50 to 60% trading, or, you know, 30% trading, you know, so then, you know, are you trading? Are there grants in there? You know, are there, you know, commissions and contracts? It's looking at, you know, where's your revenue coming from? And sometimes it's helpful to break it down as a percentage, but, you know, I would say in the main, you might get asked in a funding bid, you know, what's your percentage of, you know, sales, contracts and grants. It's not unusual for them to ask that, but anyway, that gives you a kind of picture of this business model canvas. I wonder if anybody's been doodling things out, or whether we've perhaps got time to walk through somebody's venture to have a think about this, or whether you'd rather just have some time to doodle away and work on this. So I'm a little look at people. Have we kept them? Are they still with us? Just about.
I see that Gurge's session from yesterday ties into this quite nicely with the budget, because the cost of delivery operating services, once I've done that in the Excel spreadsheet like you suggested, that ties in nicely, because before I didn't know how much it would cost. So breaking it down with all those things that he mentioned yesterday.
Well, it'll give you your key resources list, will give you a good chunk of your budget list. And then you'll be able to think in there, oh, what out of what I've just marked down here, what are my biggest costs? And, you know, what's core and consistent and what's additional, and, you know, what might change over time. So that's some of the things that he was getting people to think about yesterday. Jill had a hand up there, I think.
Yeah, obviously I'm kind of brand new with all this stuff. I wouldn't mind kind of walking through, because it's all a bit, everything's
Like,
dead
what the
new,
hell's
isn't it?
this?
Yeah, it's all dead
So,
new. Little bits make sense and other bits are like, meh.
Oh, well, no, and it's a good example, Jill, because again, on your side, it's perhaps a bit more of a potentially a private business. I know you've got social goals and social objectives within what you're doing, but there's a sort of private business angle, which some of the language on this may or may not be helpful. But in terms of what you're doing, so your customers, let's have a think. I'm guessing here, and you add to it. So your customers might be, I can't remember which side of photography you're looking at, but you're basically offering photography, aren't you, to different people?
Yeah. Basically, I've not kind of got. I don't want to limit my audience, so I've not kind of decided exactly, you know, whether it's just going to be weddings or portraits or whatever, but I do want to kind of involve victims of domestic abuse, to kind of give them some form of empowerment. And like I tagged on to the end of that conversation earlier,
mindfulness.
So
in this segment box here, your customers might look like the general public, you know, people having weddings, families wanting, you know, photography packages, schools potentially, if you dare, and other groups that, you know, that want photography. Your customers might also look like manufacturers. You might go down the route of taking photos of products for digital merchandising, or, you know, and that sort of thing. So your customers are very broad ranging, and in the main, your customers are your beneficiaries. You know, your paying customers are going to be your beneficiaries. Where that will differ will be when your beneficiaries might be women affected by domestic abuse, or people that have had mental health issues. And you want to do photography, you know, mindful photography type stuff. It might be that you're making a nice wodge of money for your weddings, that you can use that money. So when we talk about surplus, if you're making money, and let's say 10% or 15% might go back into a pot, so that you then don't have to apply for grants and all this other malarkey, and you can use your profits to work with, you know, a couple of women's hostels or some services and organisations that support people affected by trauma and domestic abuse and other things. So there's beneficiaries that you will have in addition to your customers, and you can split them out. But in the main, your customers will be your beneficiaries, and those groups where they can't afford to pay for it, you might create surplus to do that, or you might partner with others, or create your own kind of constituted group in order to apply for funds to create projects that work with in a non-for-profit way. So that's an option. In terms of then thinking about, let's go straight to value proposition in this case. So what do your customers want to get out of this? They want good quality, simple, affordable photography service. They want people to be on time. They want people who are organised, because they want people who can manage people, get them, herding cats at weddings, fun. I'm sure. People who've got good people skills. They want people whose kit and technology works.
Yeah.
Who knows? You'll know what your customers want. So your customers will want certain things, and you can ask them that, you can check that, and you can see how your competitors are describing what they're doing in order to meet customer need. And then how you'll show that you're creating an impact. So there's different ways, depends on who your customers are. So you've got customers who wouldn't give a monkeys about the social aspect of what you're doing, that's just your ethics. And so, they'll be glad that, it was a, professional service, good quality photos, good, created a good atmosphere during the shoot or whatever it might be. And, there'll be impact measures that are more around customer satisfaction on one level. There might be customers who like the fact that I'm not suggesting you will, but let's say that you say 10% of our profits annually get reinvested in community photography projects. Some people might like that, and so that might be something to track or share and get feedback on, if that's something that you do. And then where you've got those projects that are working with empowering women to talk about their lives or take photographs or use photography as a kind of therapeutic activity, there'll be a whole range of social value and impact measures that you can track there, based on skills development, based on well-being improvement, based on communication and positive relationships, based on what people are doing differently, as a result of having engaged with what you've done there, and likewise with other groups that you might work with. So that's 2 boxes ticked off already. If we jump down, another easy one is like the cost structure. So let's do the bottom row. Your biggest expenditure areas is going to be your cameras. It's going to be traveling around. Might be, there's insurance. I won't say that's your biggest, but it's in there. But other than your kit, your travel, and your insurance, marketing doesn't have to be your biggest expenditure, but for some photography businesses it might. Can you think of any others?
Actually getting the stuff printed off, and
of course so it's the cost of sales, so the cost of goods in your case is going to be higher. And the other thing you've got to think about is, when you talk about pricing, or people talk about pricing before, you're going to price either on a day rate, or on a package rate, or on an individual photographic rate. What you mustn't undersell is, if you do a day rate, there's not just the day
that you're there.
It's
the editing
the prep
as well.
time, it's the prep time, it's the editing time, and other things. What was I going to say? So that's thinking about what might change as you scale up. Might you need to take on staff? Staff would be a consideration, and cut the cost of staff in future. Cost of other kit. You might need. Petrol. Petrol. Has anybody been to the pumps? I had a heart attack this morning when I looked at 157. I'm saying to myself, oh my god,
that's
about 40 pence. Let's not think about it
in between everything else.
But this is another, it's where it's that, pestle information. Thinking what could change, what could have an impact on my plans.
Yeah.
So just thinking about some of those things within what you're doing. Energy was one that Gertrude talked about yesterday, that yours is energy focused, but there's an energy cost to, you know, editing and having your laptops and, you know, powering everything up. Surpluses we talked about. Revenue, I would imagine the bulk of yours, you know, different revenue sources. So you might want to break these down into sort of customer types, or you know, a bit like Gertrude was saying yesterday. I don't think you were there. It was talking about you could break it into, you know, private customers, school groups, you know, community. So you might break it down into customer type a little bit in your case, or you might break it down into, you know, traded income and you know, income through community partners. It depends how you'd want to categorize that to be useful to you.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of describing what you do, and you know, if an investor or a funder was to ask you, you know, where's your money coming from and how does that break down?
Yeah.
You can either think about it in terms of types of customer, or you can think about it in terms of what we said before around grants and commissions and direct sales and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So would I be able to get, like, say I started putting, like you say, a certain percent from each profit into a pot for like, you know, the community stuff.
Yeah.
Would then I be able to, so how does it work? Would I, if say I put 10% from all my sales into a pot for community groups, would I then be able to get a grant towards that and obviously subsidize some of it myself to pay myself, or how does that work?
You could do it in a couple of ways. You could just do it through the business, but I think in your case, given the fact that you're on this program, you take these steps to be, you know, part of this sort of world, and given you've already got groups in mind that you want to approach, and that, you know, you're starting out, and that could be a good way to help get things moving. It might be that forming a small constituted group with a separate bank account, so you and a couple of other people, non-related people that might have an interest in photography, might have an interest in skills development, might have an interest in wider community groups that you're talking about. There could be different types of people that you would have involved. By having that constituted group separate, then there's a clear separate entity there where your surpluses could be seen to be leaving your company's accounts and going into a community group network or association's accounts, whatever you want to call yourself. And that entity in its own right could then apply for grant funding for project-based activities or skills building activities that would happen in its own right. So a surplus could go in there, and the community association would be able to commission photographers or trainers, or, you know, whoever, you know, whoever you needed to be part of the project in order to deliver whatever it was that group was planning to do. So we could chat to you about that again, but that's, you've two options. You've either just do it within your own organisation, but I think there's probably merit to doing it in a separate entity. And then you've got a clear distinction. You don't get muddled up, and you've got the options to then go for other funds and to be seen to be showing a wider community benefit independently of what you're doing. It just depends whether you want to manage two things. You know, that would be the only bugbear on that. Just sort of finishing off on your sort of scenario here. So if we just quickly head up to these channels. So we've thought about who your customers might be. It's a mixture of people having photographs or benefiting from therapeutic photography and skills development. You know, there's different audiences that you would want to reach there. Again, there might be quite a bit of word of mouth. There might be incentives that you might need to offer, friends and family incentives or whatever, people that have been to an event, and so there might be, you know, flyers or discounted this, that and the other to get them to come back to you. There's obviously social media, looking at I would spend a bit of time on that persona exercise, and you'd soon work out who are your key customers and where you're likely to get hold of them best. You know, it might be wedding fairs that you need to go to, or wedding websites, or chat rooms or whatever. And then from the point of view of these project-based groups, it'd be a slightly different approach again, but there's, you know, you could be promoting yourself in women's support services, or council voluntary services and directories, you know, as a, you know, community photographer that reinvests profits in this, that and the other. And,
Yeah.
you know, you've got the likes of Yellow Jigsaw and Brava Design based in Liverpool. Yellow Jigsaw are in Wigan, who are social enterprises that work around media communications and photography. So some of these, you know, there's other examples of that going on. Oh, you've got Saz Media as well. She's very specific around photography, based in Stockport. So they'd be good people to talk to. With, you know, we know the format is, you know, you're taking, it's photo shoots, or it's photographing events, or it's delivering workshops. Your key activities behind all of that are a bunch of stuff. You know, there's the planning and organising, you know, of so there's a whole series of admin and follow-up with, you know, future clients, current clients, and people that you're getting back to. There's a whole you know, logistics of getting from place to place in terms of, you know, delivering what you're doing, whether it's the photographs or the workshops. There's the you know, what else is there? I'm trying to think. There's marketing, various marketing activities that you might need to do. There's I don't know if we said before, there's all the editing side of things. There's different activities that you'd need to do based on whether it's straightforward photography stuff or workshop stuff. Obviously, but you'd be able to pinpoint down, you know, it's just imagining what does a working week or a working month look like for you, in terms of being able to get to deliver what you're doing. And with, you know, the key resources, you know, are you, possible helpers, volunteers or staff in future. There's the kit and what you're doing. There's transport, you know, of some form, storage, these sorts of things. So you'd work out key resources, and partners and stakeholders, you know, are many, you know, thinking about who are the essential groups to do what you're doing. And your marketing and referral partners are going to be key, and your existing customers and how they might promote and market you as satisfied customers might be a stakeholder or future partner. There's people who help you with the editing side of things, if you need to bring others on to do all of that, and how you get, you know, whether you're just sending them digital stuff or getting things physically produced, and, you know, reprographics partners. And then there's various partners, community partners, depending on the kinds of community projects that you might want to run. Is that, I think we've covered all boxes. And hopefully in listening to that example, it's helped bring it to life. Granted, it's brought it to life as like a different style of venture, but you're all different. Anybody got any questions or thoughts, or has anybody started to do this and found something useful or found something tricky?
So mine, basically, I failed a little quickly.
Oh,
and
good.
It's like super colorful and everything.
Excellent.
But it makes me wonder, I mean, I've played with the actual business model Canva quite a lot. I used to teach it at the University of Salford.
I was the same. When I finally had like a workshop on this a couple of years ago, and I was like, I did about 3 of them.
So now I'm wondering whether basically whether I should have different ones, or whether I should continue adding loads of different post-its of different colors, because I'm thinking, so I started with a type of intervention.
Yes.
But I do different things. So I've got the back of house sort of concierge service, and then that is sort of feeding into the career session that funds the career session that we're doing in schools. So I ended up using 2 different colors of pens on the whole sheet, and have 1 color for everything that applies to the full business. So for instance,
I'd split them down. I you know, it depends, but if you've got multiple things going on, I wouldn't say this for everybody, but if you know, writing a few of these out is more useful, you can do this for different. So if you've already worked out, we've got these kinds of services, and we've got, in fact, in Jill's case, just to echo that, you know, you might do 1 canvas for the photography business, and you might do another canvas for the kind of community projects.
But then there's like things that relate to both, like for instance, the business itself. In the resources, I need a website.
Yes.
And it's a website, I need a bank account, I need one social media platform that applies to everything. So I feel like I need post-its of different colors basically for each of the services related to each of the customers. And then, so I'm just trying to work out how many pages I need or how many colors I need basically. And
that it's one of those things that you could spend a week doing this, or you could spend a week ringing people up to get your first sale. Do you know what I mean? I'm very much, don't get bogged down in the business model canvas or in the business plan. As long as you do it to the point where it's constructive and it's helpful. But people, I don't mean this, I'm not suggesting you would do this, Sandrine, but this is the problem with business plans, is you can procrastinate in the plan and not take the plan off the paper. And so I would bullet point it to the point where you can get out the door or get on the phone or have a conversation, or like Sarah was saying earlier, hold that physical thing, that next step, which I know you were already running some of what you're doing, Sandrine, so, but I'm just suggesting for others, don't get comfy and don't use this as a safety blanket. Use it as a construction tool to take you on to your next step along the way. Any other questions or thoughts on that?
Well, Nicola, I've done.
Oh, we've got a few.
Absolutely. Sorry.
Who shall I
Somebody
go?
else speaking.
I think I've got Takala on the screen, so I might have Takala first, and I saw Imelda, I think, as well, but go on, Takala. Oh, you think you're on mute, or there is no, your systems. You might, it's turned its microphone off. Oh, bummer. No, I might have to come back to you, Takala. There's no sound. Or write it in the chat. If you've got a question, write it in the chat and I'll come back to it. Sorry, so I'll come to Imelda in case either the mic works. Was it Imelda that had a hand up? Am I dreaming?
I did, yeah.
Like pick a chair.
My question was more, I think this is really, really useful, really like it. But my question is more about when you were speaking to Gillian about the idea of you've got your business and you decide to put some profit into then a constituted group. So let's say I've got my business, Mindful by Nature. If I just stick to like paying customers, if you like, take 10% or whatever, and for that social kind of aspect of the work to put it into, create then a separate group, like a.
You could do it. What I would say is, if you're not going to go to the lengths of, you know, branding something up differently or talking to people differently about that aspect of what you're doing, or you're not going to go for grant funding to boost or to start or to scale aspects of what you're doing, I wouldn't set up another thing for the sake of it unless there was a need, you know, because it's in effect managing two things and two sets of stuff. But if you're wanting to take that side of your work seriously, then setting up a separate thing gives transparency, stops things getting muddled up. It enables you to track what's happening, or it enables you to hand a bit of it over for other people to work with you on, without you exposing your whole business to other people.
So I suppose that's the thing, like, so then in terms of having two things, you need two websites, two business names,
not necessarily. So like Sandrine was saying, was it Sandrine was saying? I think that you can have a website and you might just create another page. So you might have Gillian's photography, or whatever Gillian wants to call herself, and within a website page you might have, like, you know, like you have about us, this, that and the other, and that there might be the name of, you know, community impact, or the name of the project. So you could structure it so you don't have to pay for another website. You just have a page on your website. Depends how complex it needs to be.
Okay, because I would like to apply for grant funding and stuff. So, but then I don't want to, so to have both, but then it's just that confusion of, do you need two business names, all that kind of stuff. So definitely.
Well, you've got your business and there's this kind of project, isn't it? It's probably got a name anyway. It's going to have a name potentially, or who knows. Perhaps it's something to keep thinking through. Think about, there's a kind of pros and cons exercise to go through on whether to just keep it as one, or whether to do it as a, you certainly couldn't apply for funding unless you've got, you know, three non-related people on a constituted group or as a company, go for stuff, and you might not know, do you know what I mean? So it might just be, rather than you have to do that bit, you might find 2 or 3 really good community initiatives that you want to invest that money in, and they'll work with you to deliver stuff to save you having to bother. Or it might be that you want to lead and control that aspect, in which case you'll set up your own, you know, for some people there's a friends of, or there's a network. So for example, there's a guy, PD coaching, he's a football coach, brilliant football coach, young lad, runs his private coaching stuff, but has got all these community groups that want community football clubs setting up. So he's got his private coaching, and then he's got this constituted group that's like PD coaching in the community, you know. And so he's keeping the PD coaching sort of name, but he's splitting the two things out. He'll have the one website that will have different bits of the same jigsaw, but there's him and his sole trader business over here, and there's PD coaching in the community, which is setting up, you know, a football club in Beswick, for example, and it might set up various other community events and activities and these sorts of things. And so the community association can apply for that, the funding to help these things happen. And, you know, housing associations and other community soup money will be thrown at him to do the community bit, you know. And does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Yeah, Fab, thank you.
Could I ask on top of that response, Nicola?
Yeah.
So he's using this community group to apply for funding. Is that a separate bank entity then?
Yes.
So it's got two sets of accounts for both groups.
Yes.
And would he then
he's got his sole trader account for his tax return at the end of the year, and him and 3 other people sitting on this community Friends of Association that manage this project and have community involvement, community input, and extra pairs of hands for him to make this thing happen, set the direction of what they want to do each year, source the funding to make certain things happen, subs, you know, he's got subs coming in from certain groups that will pay into that group. So we've had to go through a lot of what he was doing on his own over here. And so for his private tuition and for certain clients and the way certain aspects of what he does works, that's his private stuff, will go through his private business. But anything that's community related, including some things that used to come to him and now going into the community.
So that was my next question. So I get a lot of inquiries. We deliver a lot of workshops for schools and corporates, but we also get like smaller charities, so working with refugees, and right now they go through street style surgery and they go into the street style surgery limited fund. But if I was to have this community group, charitable, you know, social arm, then I could take some of these through the foundation, and that would look beneficial to the funders because I've got work coming in there as well.
Yeah, it would ramp up your track record and your turnover more quickly than it otherwise would.
And would I also draw a salary from that?
Potentially. There's different schools of thought on whether constituted groups or unincorporated associations, committee members should be able to have, you know, be paid or be able to deliver services in the group. Okay. There are some people say, oh no, that's not right, but they tend to come from a charity sector thing. So in the charity sector, and if you are a charity, then charity trustees aren't paid, they don't get financial recompense and so forth. There are tweaks to that. There are slight, you know, you can get out of pocket expenses and blah, you know, there's certain aspects, but there's a school of thought, you know, management committee members and trustees of charities do it on a voluntary basis, but on a social enterprise that's not the case. So I know examples of community groups and unincorporated associations where in their constitution, and we have example templates of these if people are thinking of setting these up, constitution says we're doing, these are our aims, these are our objects, and as part of, you know, what's allowable, what their powers are, it might say that, you know, management committee members, you know, may be paid for ad hoc work, or, you know, can certainly claim out of pocket expenses, and maybe paid for to deliver services, you know, key services to deliver, you know, community projects, or however you want to phrase it. So, you know, it's possible. There are some funders who go, oh, but I know plenty of community groups who have people on the management committee who are the core deliverer of aspects of their work. They're one of, you know, 2 or 3 freelancers that deliver things on behalf of the organisation.
Okay, so they would then charge for their time in delivering through
Yeah,
their
invoice. Yeah, invoice.
So can I just ask one more question? If that wasn't an unincorporated group and it was a company limited by shares, limited by guarantee, would you take a salary out of that then? Yeah, you could take a normal salary out of that, because it's not just a group, it's a company.
Yes.
All right, awesome, thank you.
And and it's whether you want to manage two companies. And to be fair, it's horses, of course. When I say manage two companies, managing, management committee stuff isn't that different to board stuff on a company, and managing the budgets and finances isn't that different to a company. The only bit that's different is the cost. The cost of accounting is more for a company than it is for a constituted group.
Okay.
But anyway,
thank you.
I'm not sure if you've got your hand up, Gillian, or if that was from before. And I'm just going to check in the chat, because I remember Takala had got a question, and there's probably all sorts of other things.
No, mine was before we've spoken.
Oh, lovely. That's all right.
There's a question from Kirsty in the chat, which we touched on just now, but how do you go about working out staffing costs and what you pay yourself? Are there any guidelines? So yes and no. I'm just checking. I can't see Takala. I wanted to comment. Oh, sorry. I'm just going back to Takala and then I'll look at that. So I've lost her now. There we go. I wanted to comment on what you just said, that sometimes we get bogged down in wanting to perfect. Yes, sometimes it's good. Yes, absolutely. Just get going. Otherwise you'll never get started. And what I find is the sooner you get out there, the sooner you perfect it. So if you are a perfectionist, which a lot of us can be, it'll become more perfect if you involve other people in it, and if you get it off the page. If you've got to try and trick yourself into getting out of perfecting it, have others help you perfect it and take it to the real world, so that they can, the sooner it's out there, the sooner you perfect it and get customers and everything else. So Kirsty was saying about staffing. God. I think it's are there any guidelines? Won't go as far to say I don't think there are guidelines. I mean, there's what is it? What are you looking? Are you looking at setting up a social enterprise, Kirsty, or how have you structured yours? Are you a sole trader?
Mine's already set up, but it's a dormant company, so it's a CIC.
Got you. How do you go about working out staffing costs?
I just really struggle with how much to pay yourself, because I feel like, I don't know if I can only speak for myself, but I'd have a tendency to kind of play it down and not give myself enough.
Well, there you go. You've answered your question. but on that, I know it's not easy. It really isn't. And you think, but
would you work out an hourly rate or a day rate for yourself?
You tend to do both. You work your hourly rate you work your day rate off an hourly rate, don't you? And everybody's different. Some people won't get out of bed for less than £50 an hour. Do you know what I mean? And it's up to you. What can your market pay you that? Will a grant funder pay you that? Will a commissioner pay you that? Chances are, yes, they might, if you're offering certain things, doing things in a certain way. But in reality, people tend to be in it anything from whatever, 15 to 20 to £35 an hour. If you think about sort of the benchmarks of things, and you think about what salaries look like in different roles and what you're modeling your salary off, you could look at roles and other salaries out there and being commensurate with that in terms of what an annual salary would look like and how you try and achieve that. It's a task that we didn't do. When we look back at Gurge's session yesterday, there is another workshop that we run, but we haven't tucked it into this, and we might run if we do some half days, in getting people to think about, what do I ultimately write down all of, you've done this before, probably, write down all of your personal finances. What does it cost you to function? How much do you need to earn a month? Chances are it's anywhere between £1,500 to £3,000 a month, or somewhere in between. And so depending on what you want to earn and what you need to earn, how are you going to get there, and how many of these things have you got to do, and have you got health conditions, or have you got the energy to work all hours, or whatever it might be, and do you just want to work 3 days a week or whatever? So all of these things factor into what you're going to charge and why. And I would talk to this with a coach that you have,
Yeah.
That would be one way to help look at this, as well as thinking about, what's the minimum. And in a previous life, salaries that you might have had, you should be earning at least that, if not more. So go get it.
Oh, thank you.
No, that's all right. And yeah, absolutely. It's hourly rates or yeah, we'll soon help you work out and start charging what you're worth. Do we have a topic on the session self-employed? So I will come back to that. Sorry, I'm just seeing if I've missed questions. So yeah, I am coming to the right ones. So yes and no. So yes, I'm going to run a session as part of the bolt-on courses around self-employment and setting yourself up. I'm not suggesting that social enterprises aren't sole traders and self-employed people, if I'm honest. Normally we'd be supporting people to set up companies and constitute groups, but we appreciate that some people, depending on what they're doing and where they're starting, need to start at that point. So which is why we put the self-employment workshops on. So yes, you could come to that self-employed session and we'll be discussing what people are doing and why, and how to put good practice in place and make sure you're doing all the right things from various perspectives. And then I will be touching on social enterprise and how sole trader, I'll be touching on governance in that. In fact, I'll probably touch on it more given all the questions about it. But yesterday in the chat, I put a link to the legal structures webinar, and I'd highly recommend, I can stick it in the chat again today. There were 2 workshops I shared yesterday. And in fact, Shelley's sending them out in the email.
Yeah, that link's in the email that's going to follow up.
I'll leave them there then. So there's a governance workshop in its own right. It's a webinar, and there's achieving bid writing success. And that there's as you can see, time disappears and there's more everybody needs to learn that doesn't quite fit in the program, and not everybody wants everything. So we've left those outside for you to look at your leisure. So hopefully that'll help you, Sarah, and you can chat about whatever with people, your coaches and others. I think that's it on the questions for now, unless anybody's got something burning that I've missed, certainly not in the chat or anyone else. We've got to that point in the session where we're nearly on the homeward stretch, but there's 2 things I want to do. So one, this was just we worked you hard there in thinking things through as usual. Oh, thank you. So Shelley's just put in the chat the link to the self-employed workshop that we're doing. I've called it that. If I'm honest, it'll look at that, but it will also look at a little bit wider options for social ventures and what people can set up and what they do. And then we were just going to challenge you. I've got a last little interactive task before we start to wrap up and get ready for next time. So a couple of minutes, little challenge for you. There's a lot to take in, and there's a lot you could say. And this morning when we were listening to you all, we had like a number of you give a show and tell and talk about who you are, what you're doing, what's the social issue you're trying to address, how are you doing it, what's unique about you, and And so there's a space to tell a story with what you're doing. There's that time where you need your elevator pitch, that 1 minute succinct, but then there's also a need to just very quickly, first impressions are key, aren't they, with any of this stuff? And if you can get across super fast what it is you do, it makes life a lot easier. And so some of this we've been alluding to throughout the last 2 days. So to kind of wrap up, I was going to get you in the chat in a moment to try and see if you can come up with an 8-word mission statement. I've got a couple of examples to kind of sow a seed. I'm not suggesting that you have to, and it might be like, oh God, I don't know where to start. But I was watching Naomi's webinar that I am going to put in the chat before we go, and we'll certainly put it in the email, where she gave me this idea for doing this. I thought, oh, that's great. And then I thought, oh God, well, what does flourishes sit within that? And I counted it, and it's perfect. Support women to lead change they see needed. Oh, I've got a typo, typical. But support women to lead change they see needed. And it just so happened, that it was 8 words long. So we have our 8-word mission. There's some other examples here, and in terms of why it's good to be succinct is you're trying to keep people alive and keep them switched on and work out what else you need to tell them. You don't need to tell everybody everything. That's where you can come unstuck or people switch off. So if we open up and we talk to people about, you know, we support women to lead the change they see needed in communities, you know, I'd add a couple more on there. And then depending on the audience, you know, whilst increase their economic independence, you know, a bit like Takala was saying, you know, whilst influence strategic decisions at local and national levels, whilst, you know, use their lived experience to innovate new solutions, you know, we could follow that eight-word mission statement with a whole bunch of, you know, afterthoughts, but it's just getting that point across. So be having a little think in your own mind on this. And even if you don't know, even if it's just a series of words, you know, sometimes you just need to get your, you know, what is the key essence, or what's the values of what your organization is about, that helps to help you form this. Another couple of examples that I heard Naomi sort of share. There was one where, what am I reading? Can't read my own handwriting. There was one where, you know, rehabilitate coral reefs in the Western Pacific. There was one that, you know, reduce the transmission of HIV in Africa, you know, saves kids' lives in, I can't read my own writing, but it's what's the punchy bullet points that you can, you know, get Zambian farmers out of poverty. You know, what's the thing that you're doing? If you can nail it down and try and get it into 8 words, it would be fab to see those start to filter into the chat. I was having a go at this morning whilst you were talking, and I haven't perfected it at all. It does take a while to do. In fact, it can take 2 or 3 years, you know, so we are putting you on the spot here, but so when I was listening to Sarah this morning, I think I put something like, you know, intensive and transformational support for people of all faiths, you know, to rebuild relationships and nurture communities, or, you know, something like that. And what else was I looking at? I think Tanya, she was there. What have we got here? Help people let go of failure, guilt and shame, you know, and, you know, so it's starting to pull to, you know, those are some of the things that she, you know, spoke about herself. There were others that I'm reading here, but I think yours in the chat will probably make more sense than what I was pulling out this morning. But give it a go. See if you've got, you know, in a nutshell, your 8-word mission statement. Yeah. There you go. Oh, there's some good ones there. So it's just giving you a feel for how to, because the amount of times, it's a bit like Shelley said this morning, the amount of, you know, you feel like you're on a repeat record because you have to keep telling people what you're doing. But if it's succinct, you can remember it. And one of the things I watched last night, somebody had to go away and get their mission statement because they couldn't remember it. And that's the sign of a poor mission statement, or a wordy one. Here we go. Cooking in. Yeah. Cooking in and with the community in Preston. Absolutely, Jen. And I think, you know, that gives a good description. The only bits I might add on to something like that is, you know, over time, thinking about, you know, what's the impact that you're trying to create. So that absolutely said, you know, we provide cooking in and with the community in Preston in order to, you know, where's that, you know, changing lives or supporting people element, you know, and all I'm meaning of that is, you know, don't sell yourself short on the impact that you're creating with what you're doing. Deliver services to unlock communities' aspirations and potential. And you know, there are these things where, you know, a lot of them can end up looking and sounding very similar, can't they, over time? But
I always think it's really good if you can try and make it as concrete as possible. So I think, was it Kirsty said, it's very specifically for children. So if you can say specifically who the communities are, what the services do, what the benefit they bring. It always amuses me when you're on the motorway and you see all sorts of lorries with things on their back saying things like world-class logistics. It's like, in what? It's like, you know, it's just these very kind of corporate sounding, vague things. It's almost pointless painting on a van because it doesn't actually say what you're doing. Like the Ronseal test, you know, it does what it says on the tin. So, you know, be specific and be clear so that people have got a really clear idea of who you're working with and how you're benefiting them.
That's what I found the whole there, because same thing, I've got different communities.
Yeah.
Startup entrepreneurs or young people, but I'm doing the same thing for very different communities, and I'm struggling basically to
But you've narrowed it in a nutshell there, haven't you? You know, delivering services to unlock community aspirations and potential, and then depending on who you're talking to, you can add in the extra strap line, or you can add in the extra phrase, and you can then tailor it to who you're talking to.
I'd even say what you said, Sandrine, you know, working with entrepreneurs and young, you know, and young people.
Yeah.
It just becomes very clear who it is that you work with.
Yeah, working with entrepreneurs and young people to deliver cooking with community. Oh, there we go. Cooking with communities whilst uplifting each other through supportive friendships. Yep, that's great. Support women and the youth. Discover. Yeah, and I think there's something around, if you can, finding ways that they you make them your own, in your own language or your own, you know, community sort of culture. We probably need a bit of work on ours, because everybody's starting to use this language. We came up with this, I don't know, about 8 years ago. We need to do some work on ours, our own. Transforming faith people. I'm not sure, will people understand what faith people are? They might. If faith people know they're faith people, absolutely. And I can guess what that means. But transforming faith people of faith, I don't know. Whatever works.
Okay, yeah.
People with faith.
People with it's making me want to sing George Fuller. Transforming communities through the experience of making art. Great. So you the juices are flowing, and you know, as much as there's the, you know, we've said don't have a big waffly business plan, or write one for the right audience, and as much as we've given you various tools to kind of chunk things down to start this in a place where you're most comfortable, having that, you know, succinct language to be able to go out tomorrow or next week, start using, is all important stuff. And you've got a session, if you booked onto it, there's a podcasting session next week with Vic. Oh, actually, that's what we need to do, isn't it? That's what's the last slides. Oh, apart from, well, I'll come back to that because I'm just talking about this. So we were just saying, I think Shelley's put this slide together.
Yeah, it's just a reminder of the date. So I'll send the link. So there's one link for all the media, marketing, creative and digital ones. So you, as Time to Grow participants, you can just log on. You don't need to register with Eventbrite or anything. Just turn up. We'll send out some reminders where we can. But yeah, there are the dates. Just to remind you, there's a new one in there which you might not have seen, which is Make Video Work for Your Venture, which is being run by Michaela, who's just got some really easy, low cost, no cost ways of making video, whether you're doing it to promote what you're doing, you know, whether you want to put it on social media and so forth. Lots of it is in Canva, so that might be interesting or useful to those of you who are interested in using Canva. Very different content to the Yellow Jigsaw Canva session, which is on the 16th, which will be more around graphics. This is around kind of moving images and so forth, so that one should be really good.
But the beauty of reading through all these is they're all being delivered by people who we've funded and supported in the last year or 5, you know, so it'll be interesting as well, you know, in seeing how these sessions get delivered and where people are at. You know, they all started out scratching their head and waffling away. Do you know what I mean? Like we all do, trying to make sense of what it is we're running, and everything gets shaped and morphed over time. So I hope you can book onto those where you've got the time and where that's going to help you. And
if you want to book onto Eventbrite, then you get all the reminders. So it's up to you if you want to. But if you just want to show up, you can do that too.
Thanks, Shelley. Yeah, that's brilliant. And a brand new one, it's not in these sections, so it probably wouldn't be in there, is for any of you who have come across Jackie Bailey. We've just got Jackie Bailey signed up for doing a, you know, visioning your future. So if you know, I know we've talked about that a little bit, but
Jackie, that's on the next slide actually.
Oh, is it? Oh, I'm sorry. Me not. Right. Oh, perfect. Oh, well, there you go. And there's the other. So you're asking questions about these. So those are the dates for the getting started in enterprise as self-employed as a social entrepreneur. I would add on to that. We've kept it suitably vague because people might come on from all sides, and you know, we'll talk about the sole trader path, but we'll be talking about, you know, creating social change as an entrepreneur and these other routes, and where you might have to start as a sole trader if you're trading sooner rather than later, which is great, which is better than, you know, lots of people are in a position to do initially, and where that might lead if you want to evolve a social venture. or even if you're not looking at trading just yet, or we work with lots of people who are not in work for important reasons, but they want to set up an organisation that can then deliver things, do things that they can volunteer for or work for in the future. There's ways that we can show people, how they can do that too. So and that session of Jackie's will be a good one. It always is. Even as us organising these things, I went to one of her sessions in Stockport. Melanie was at the Twisted Trees there, and one of the things she gets people to do is think, where you're going to be in 90 days, gets you quite specific, and what do you want to be doing? And it might be to do with your business that you want to look at it might be to do with yourself. And I'm like, when we looked at the calendar, that was February half term, and I'm like, I want to be in Iceland with my son. And so that's where I was last week, which I would not have done had I not gone to that session. So who knows what comes out of these things. Well worth going to. So I will check the chat for any other questions and have a look at any other bits and bobs. We just wanted to give you this heads up for the Mentorathon. So I can't believe we've run this course much more condensed than we've run others. Previously we ran it like a day a month for like a longer period, and this time we've run it 2 days a month. And although I think that's been good because it's given people a short, sharp focus to get quite a bit done in a short space of time for people that can commit in that way, it means that the programme is nearly up. And as we've said, there will be other things going on into the summer, so it doesn't fall off a cliff, but it means, gosh, the Mentorathon has arrived nearly. So 30th of March, it's all about thinking about your theory of change, which builds on the business model canvas and all. It's just different ways of analysing and looking and planning and communicating what you're doing. But the theory of change is very much leading everything into social value and impact measurement, and communicating the impact that you plan to make, and then mapping and evaluating, how that's going to take shape, and why will you bother doing that is what the 30th is all about, ahead of the Mentorathon. That I just want to sow a seed. I don't want to give you lots of paperwork or things to do. We try and keep this very kind of low key, but I'm just flagging up that on March 31st, we've got a day where we will be, in the morning, we'll be doing a bit of reflection, and we'll be helping people prepare for the afternoon's Mentorathon. And then after lunch, and we're giving you lunch finally, you don't have to go make your own. The afternoon's Mentorathon is like the action learning groups, a little bit like the sounding boards and the action learning groups that we've done throughout the programme or earlier in the programme. But instead of just your peers, we're inviting a wider group of some of our coaches, other mentors, and other people that work in different sectors to come and take part, so that it helps create a little mini think tank for you to troubleshoot a challenge. So in a month's time, by the time you've cogitated on some of what you're doing, some of you are already going away and trialing and doing and starting certain things, or some of you came to the programme with a particular challenge or a block that you're trying to kind of work through. This gives another opportunity in a different kind of format for troubleshooting a challenge. And so we're just giving you that heads up that we're hoping that as many of you as possible will perhaps be able to come to that physical day. We've got it at the Frog and Bucket, if I'm correct, Shelley?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I saw the emails earlier. So the Frog and Bucket is like a comedy club in Manchester. It can be a bit sticky and a bit dark, but we'll get around that. They'll give it a good clean, and we hope they will. No,
my husband performs there on a regular basis.
Brilliant.
So
Well,
does he?
he does a bit the frog. So yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, did you know that the managing director there is a woman, fabulous woman and change maker called Jessica Toomey, and she's on our Ellie programme, and so
good to know.
Yeah, and we want to support that venue and everything. So anyway, we're having it there, and so just needing to let you know that it's happening there. We'd love to see you there. Shelley will check who's available and who's coming, and we'll be checking who's happy to pitch for support, because we have to schedule in a certain number of sounding board sessions for people. And so if you know now, yes, I'm available that day, and yes, I'm definitely coming, and then perhaps pop in the chat, something that says that you want to take part in a sounding board session. You don't all have to do this. You know, if you're not ready for it yet, it's not something you'd want to do, that's fine. But these sounding board sessions can be about troubleshooting a challenge with this enterprise, this thing. You can use the group perhaps to gain feedback and act as a little focus group on something that you want to pose, and use them as a surveying sort of focus group. Or we've had plenty of people coming who are at a bit of a crossroads in their work situation, or that we've had people bring challenges around, managing motherhood and setting up a business, or challenges around all sorts. There's very few challenges that we couldn't grapple with, I would say, on these things, whether it's enterprise, whether it's about work stuff, or just general challenges that you're trying to grapple with. So let us know if you're going to be up for involved with that. We'll take a quick note of who we know is definitely coming and definitely up for running a sounding board. I say running, but speaking in a sounding board. The great thing is that those of you who are up for being part of a sounding board, a number of the people, or as many as we feel able to back on the day, both from a financial perspective, as there's only so much money, but also who's going to deliver the best value for the investments that we can make, and just gets you used to I guess being critiqued and going for some sort of funding. We'll be making some cash grants in the region of it varies, 150 to 350 pounds is the kind of usual sum. Some people just need a few bits and pieces to get something done, or go on a training course or whatever it might be. Other people perhaps need some money to put towards something, or get a piece of kit, or cover travel costs, or pay for someone to do some admin support for so long. I don't know. The beauty about the seed funding is it can do anything and everything, providing it's not illegal, providing it's going to deliver some sort of benefit to the community as part of what you're doing, and provided it's going to help with your sort of progression to make things happen. So hopefully, I don't know if anyone's got any questions on that. It's something that's been in the plan for a while, and we keep mentioning it. I haven't told you the format for it and how it all works yet, because we don't want to overwhelm you, but next week we will send you a little bit of an overview. But in essence, and I know we've got to wrap up, but in essence, it's about 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minute session, where, a bit like we've done before, you just say a bit about who you are, what's the issue you're trying to solve, where you're at with it, and the challenge that you'd like us to help you look at, whether it's a specific challenge or whether you want to use that group as a focus group. And then depending on the way you want the session to run, there's a way that we use that method where we ask you to sit to one side while we have a good old think about the challenge, to help unpack and put other perspectives on the challenge that you've brought to the table, and hopefully come up with some new ideas, contacts and routes forward, as well as create lots of sort of affirmation for you, and boost you in terms of the way you're thinking about what you're trying to do and the routes that you're trying to take forward. And then we invite you back to the conversation after we've talked for 15-20 minutes. You're there listening like a fly on the wall. It's kind of weird, but it works. And then we get a sense of what you've made of what you've heard. And some of you who've been on the programme have practiced all of this already, so it won't come as a new kind of process. And then we'll ask you what you're taking away and what perhaps your next steps are going to be from the session. So it's quite informal, but it's a really good, short, sharp way to help troubleshoot challenges and have you get that next boost ahead of the summer to push on with the next part of what you're doing. Okie dokie. So
is that something, Nicola, if we attend the Frog and Bucket and we're not pitching, do we listen to other people go?
Yes, we are absolutely using you. I should have said. So there's two things, two answers to that question. One is, if there are people who don't want to pitch for support, don't want to get feedback or troubleshooting opportunity, you don't have to do that. Obviously we've created this in order to help people move ahead with that, and we'd really encourage people to give it a go, but if you'd rather not, that's fine too. And
one of the things that we always find is that people who are just listening, that you just end up learning all sorts, you know, just in virtue of hearing about other people's ventures. It's remarkable how much stuff is relevant. So
and I would say nobody's coming just listening as well, everybody's coming participating, because everybody's got knowledge and skills and experience to bring to the table, and that's all part of this. It's all part of stopping people thinking that have I got the right to do this, have I got the right to say this. You know, if you're using your knowledge and skills to, you know, contribute to the sounding board, it soon makes you realize, you know, how valuable your knowledge, skills and experience is, or we hope it will. I know we're all different and we'll all, you know, take things in slightly different ways, but we'd absolutely be encouraging anybody who comes along will be sitting on a sounding board or a couple of sounding boards that will be part of that peer support. You know, these so-called mentors, coaches and experts coming in are just people, you know, they just happen to have some more knowledge, skills and additional things to bring to the table as part of the discussion. So yeah, in the morning we've got some reflection as a group and a bit of prep for the afternoon. We'll have some lunch, and then throughout the afternoon we'll probably be running, I'm hoping we'll be running something like 12 to 15 sounding board sessions, maybe more, God forbid. But I mean, we'll do it because we've got the people to do it. And usually your sounding board will have 2 or 3 people off your programme and a couple of people who are externals. So we'll, you know, and a chair. So me, Shelley, Anna, and some of the coaches that we've got will come and get involved and make it all run smoothly. So there's nothing for you to do other than come and enjoy the day, get some support and feedback on what you're doing, and hopefully where people are up for that, being part of the conversations to think about things, share support, and give their own perspectives. And that there's no such thing as like a daft question, or, you know, we design the sounding board groups so that you've got different brains and different perspectives, and that all adds to the problem solving, and even people who've got less knowledge or less experience of a challenge coming to the table can ask questions that opens up the discussion, you know, in a more useful way perhaps than would otherwise happen if everybody's just talking on one level. So hopefully that's,
no, it'd just be really good to get everyone back in the room together, because
yes, absolutely,
so much benefit to be had from that.
So the 31st is going to take place at the Frog and Bucket in Manchester.
So we'll send the address and everything.
And then
the 30th is virtual, isn't it, Nicola?
Yes, so the Thursday is going to be virtual, and
so Wednesday's virtual.
I can't speak. Yeah, Wednesday's virtual, Thursday's physical. It'll all come out, and brilliant. No worries. Great. So yeah, we'll email people. Please don't be put off. The Mentorathon is it's a lot of fun, and everybody that has taken part so far have found it really, really beneficial. And you know, those people who get involved and use the opportunities of troubleshooting experience, you know, have the option to ask for some cash if there's something that we feel, you know, we'll just simply ask you. We're not asking for loads of facts and evidence. You know, it's a case of it'd be worth in advance having to think about if you could get your hands on £250 to £300, what would you do with that money? And you know, how would it help you, and what difference would it make to the community? You know, and that's as easy as it gets. It's the easiest funding pitch you'll ever have to make. So awesome, brilliant. Well, unless we've got any other questions, I'll tell you what I did say I do. Oh yeah, we're at the end. I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to find that other workshop, because like you've got the time, but I'm just letting people know that I'm just trying to cut and paste and then we'll stop our recording and then people will know they can hit the road. But where am I? Stop sharing, and then I can see people. That work better. So yeah, all as I'm putting in the chat here, I mentioned earlier about what's the word? Naomi Timperley did a session. Me, her, and a chap called Frank are running this thing for this Cycle and Stride Active Leaders program. A really interesting program working with people running cycling and walking initiatives, community initiatives around Greater Manchester. A bit like the Time to Grow program. there's all these sessions, and they're keeping their listen again sessions on this website. So I'm just posting the link there in case any of the topics that are on there are helpful or might fill some gaps or help create some more time for you to think about where you're at. The link that I've given you, I think it's the second workshop down in the list. Naomi's doing this social business canvas. If you wanted a bit more time on that, or if you wanted to see how other people were approaching it, and a couple of different examples. I think she uses the Tom's shoes example and walks through that as an example. It could be helpful, so I'm just throwing it out there. But other than that, I think we're good to go. Thanks for all your time and listening, and we'll see you at the next one, unless there's anything else. I think. I'll tell you what, if I can just say, when we meet next time, obviously we're online for the 30th, the 31st, in and around your mentorathon. I'm afraid we're using it as a great opportunity to launch our how-to festival. So I don't know if we've mentioned to you yet, but as part of the progression and ongoing support or ongoing stuff, you will all get free access to the how-to festival that we've created. So basically, because there's so many brilliant women that we've worked with in the last few years doing brilliant things, we ran a physical how-to festival. We ran like 18 workshops in July when everybody was locked up, but we were allowed out, and we just thought, let's give it a go and see what happens. And it worked really well, but as you can imagine, either lots of people, it was nearly the summer holidays, and lots of people couldn't get to it, and we knew we'd want to take it online. So we've done that, and there's about 30 workshops going to be well, there'll be more actually, 30 to 40 workshops, a whole bunch of podcasts and other resources. So you'll all get a free ticket to this, and you'll recognise some of the people involved, because some of them deliver on our programmes as well. So I've stuck that in the chat. You don't have to do anything, you don't have to register. We're going to send you the links to it all, but it's just letting you know. So go and have a fun parents' evening, Sandrine. Yes, I need to get ready for my son and dropping off this, that and the other. So sorry to keep you. We hope you've had a good couple of days, and we'll see you all soon.